to, again, another webinar series on standards, EMC standards, both domestically and internationally. This time I'm going to talk about one of the national committees in the United States, and that is the American National Standards Institute Accredited Standards Committee, C63, which covers EMC in our country. Very similar to the activity going on in CISPR, the International Special Committee on Radio Interference, and its standards. Just a very brief introduction to C63. It is an accredited standards committee to make standards. The American National Standards Institute has no committees. They are just in the accreditation business. And what I have in front of you right now is the home page, which is very easy to find, www.c63.org. And on the left-hand column, you'll see several areas of some on news. The About C63 we're already looking at. The main committee is the committee that does the voting on standards. There are subcommittees that develop the standards and working groups. And the standards development process is obviously what it stands for. It's background information. We have a couple of links there that I don't propose to go into. The members area is really only for capturing minutes that have not been approved, because the only thing that shows up in the open part of C63 are approved minutes. Workshops, again, C63 is has an agreement, memorandum of understanding with the U.S. EMC Standards Corporation, and that is to handle the finances of C63 and also to run the education program, the workshops. And I'm in charge of the education for C63, so I either plan the workshops, give them myself, or give them with others that are authoritative, in the sense that I only use speakers that have been part of the development process of the standards we're talking about, because anyone can pick up the standards book and simply make some PowerPoint slides, but why the clauses are there and why there's some approaches there, that can only be done by people involved in it. So that's all I want to say. I want to show on the home page of there. And now I'd like to go to the heart of the meeting. This is a meeting that was held, you can see, the first week in May in Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. Yeah, Brooklyn Center doesn't mean Brooklyn, New York. The reason why I'm doing this even 3 months later, a little less than 3 months later, is that there's some work going on in the background, but not that much, and that means what I will talk about today is still really current. And if it isn't, I'll try to update it as we go through the agenda here. The reason why I'm going through the agenda, there's hyperlinks to the status presentation of the standards, and that is very illustrative, and I will probably go through most of the reports from the subcommittees. So again, the agenda is shown in front of you. If I scroll down, you can start seeing the members we have in C63. There are 27 organizational members, and some that are sole proprietors, which are individual companies with one person being the principal. And you can see the FCC, FDA, the EMC Society is represented. Then we have Liberty Labs, Calibration Lab, both Motorola's, NIST, Northwest EMC, and you can find all of this on the C63 website, so I'm not going to spend time. The names that are highlighted were those that were present. If you go on the website, you actually see the primary and the alternate, both people. And these are the individuals. I'm a member as an individual. And then we have 3 member emerituses. Emeriti, I guess, is better. And they wanted to keep on the mailing list, but they have no vote. So just continuing on, the meeting is opened. We have to present patent slides. One of the things that is getting very important is intellectual property, ownership, patents, and so forth. There have been some patent infringement liability that has moved forward, and that's one of the best ways to stop a standard from getting out the door. If you don't properly indicate and have a patent holder agree with reasonable and non-discriminatory terms, so-called RAND, to charge only a nominal amount for the use of the standard or for free. And a lot of time that's done for free for the obvious reason is that whatever is patent that's in the standard will get priority in use, and so that's a benefit for the patent holder. So let's move on. There were several standards that were published this year within the last 6 months. C63.18 is in situ measurement using known sources of RF, such as two-way transmitters, walkie-talkies and so forth, in doing a very, always say, gross estimate of the immunity of products in the field, installed in the field, that are close to such transceivers, including cellular telephone, for example. C63.4 is our emission measurement standard. I'll get into that more. C63.7 is site. It is the information we had gathered together on construction techniques for test sites, radiated emission test sites. C63.14 is our dictionary, and that is updated on a fairly regular basis. And let me talk a little bit more about that. So we do over the minutes of the last meeting. The Secretariat always gives a report, and let's see if these links pop up. And it shows up here. Okay, let's go to full screen. Pat Reuter was our secretary. She has stepped down, and well, she actually got a promotion, and we have Sue Vogel has taken over as of the end of this meeting. And she looks at, but we need, since IEEE is the Secretariat, we need to know, general information of what is inactive. PINS is the Project Identification Notification System of ANSI. All of our standards have to go through the PINS process. That's then the standard is announced as being worked on by ANSI Standards Review. That comes out about every 6 weeks. So she talks about the revision, and maybe I'll go to more of the technical details later on when I talk about this. But you can see from the information here that she's mostly concerned with meeting the requirements for balloting, the majority vote, majority return of ballots, and so forth. And so that's what she's showing here. For example, the ballot opened, in the end of March. It closed in April, and there are 3 negative votes, 4 no responses, no abstentions, 6 approved, and you can read it, as you want, as you wish. But the bottom is it passed the approval test, which is the majority of the balloting body, 63% returned, and of that, 2/3 had to approve, and you can see here that 80% did, which is clearly greater than 2/3. C63.5 is the antenna, and again, at the time there was a recirculation needed because the ballot failed. the 4 disapprovals was significant in answering them, that there's going to be a recirculation, which is essentially another vote with the changed text. And the reason why it's important to answer the negative, at least to resolve it, not necessarily to make changes, but at least to be able to answer it. Anything that goes to ANSI then for final approval before publication, if there are no negative ballots, then the staff can review the information that you see in front of you and say it's okay to be published. If, however, there is still an open negative ballot, even though you send why you maybe not have changed anything because of it, that goes up to a higher level. It's called the Board of Standards Review. And think of that as adding 6 weeks to 8 weeks, because there's a lot of standards that are under the auspices of the accreditation process at ANSI. So the point being is, if you want to, you really want to get rid of the negative ballots and accommodate them. Otherwise, the publication is delayed, and it may be delayed very significantly. 3, 4, 5 months. Dot 12 is on, as it shows there, on limits and test levels, and that was a clean ballot. There's 1 negative vote, but that has been resolved. Don't forget, this is now 3 months old here. Then dot 16 on ESD. By the way, MEC is mandatory editorial coordination. Mandatory editorial coordination. That means it goes to the IEEE editors, and they look it over for meeting template requirements, putting in the boilerplate on errata, core agenda, and so forth. But as happened at this meeting, it was agreed to go to a formal ballot, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Dot 26 is on licensed radio testing of licensed radio devices. This is a license meeting by the FCC and by extension the Industry Canada. And as you might imagine, this had new material in it. Although the ballot passed barely, you can see at the bottom 245 comments, which is probably the highest number of comments I've seen in recent years on the ballot. We've already talked about the standards been published, and then this is just BSR's Board of Standards Review, and she's just saying here there is a project identification notification system. It tells you what the project is. BSR 8 is the sending the information first to ANSI, and BSR 9 is the results of ballot, and that's the one that's really reviewed for publication. And I don't think I have to say, well, this shows you, someone always asks, well, how current are these things? Well, you can see by the numbers, most of them are pretty current, and at least more than half are less than 2.5 years. And there are some that are very stagnant, and the one on antenna calibration at the bottom there, C63.5. But the ones that are older, you can see their revision is in progress, so that meets our criteria. Talked about patents, I won't go into that. This one here, one of the things that we're doing right now in C63 is reviewing our operating procedures, and that has to be approved by ANSI, and it gives essentially a roadmap of how we operate. ANSI calls it essential requirements. We call it operating procedures, and that is a major task, because since you're going to be audited on that, much as a laboratory would with the assessor coming in to do a 17025 assessment, that's essentially what this is as well. But since IEEE owns the Secretariat and the intellectual property, they go to the IEEE first and do Standards Association and do their audit. And then the auditor sees, you got a C committee that you're the Secretariat we're going to look at their paperwork and so forth, and that's where C63 gets into the picture. Don't talk about issues right now. There are some actions. One that I had to research on confidentiality notices. Probably those that are watching the webinar have boilerplate that is added on outgoing emails that says, in essence, that it's only intended for the person addressed in the email. And that makes it very difficult if you just simply follow that strictly, that if that's a contribution on, let's say, paragraph 7 of a standard that you want to get to the working group of 10 people, if you look at that statement on the email notices, you can't send it to the other 9. So we're working on a legal way to help in that. It may well be that you can't use your company computer because you can't eliminate that confidentiality statement at the base of the email, and go home and use your home computer, which you have control over, and generally does not have a confidentiality notice. So that is work in action. This one is kind of interesting. What happens if you had a balanced balloting pool and someone dies on that balloting pool, which becomes unbalanced? We can make light of this. Obviously, it's serious when someone departs. But one of the members during the meeting said, well, can we send an email to heaven and ask for them to withdraw from the balloting group officially? I don't think that will happen. Okay, I think I'm going to stop with going over that and move on then to the next part of maybe I'll close the internet connection here just in case that happens. So I'm using some bandwidth here. Okay, so now let's move on then really to the heart, because item 7 on the agenda I've already talked about on revising the operating procedures. Dean Gonzone of Northwest EMC is in charge of that. He's got a fairly large group helping. I'm doing a lot of the work in the background as to why were some of the procedures the way they were. And you can see action item number 2 at the bottom. I will check regarding amendments, core agenda, errata, and so forth, which by the way, I have done. And we've held some webinars on this topic already. And really it's in preparation for the new. Now, why do we care about the operating procedures? Well, for obvious reasons. If you don't follow them, you may lose your accreditation. And that's the kiss of death for a standards development organization, to lose their accreditation. But more importantly, if it was put, those operating procedures were put there for a reason, so that folks like you that are listening to the webinar and will later on know how we operate, and without having to have someone sit down on a phone call or exchange infinite number of emails answering questions. Well, why did you do this, and so forth. Well, so even though it's an administrative issue, it's very critical for accredited standards committees. So that was the report, and if I bring up the report, maybe I'll just do quickly. Be quickly, it's just part of what we're doing here for the webinar. And I'll bring up the PowerPoint and so forth. Okay, this is again a very short summary. All these, by the way, are hyperlinked to the published agenda. So they've taken those things that on the existing draft change that are less than controversial, talk to the secretariat, and at that time it's Pat Roeder, and of course receive comments from us on the task group. In the document, since it was generic from ANSI to start with, they use the word consensus body all the time, and we don't call our committees consensus bodies. So we're going to call them what they are: the main committee, subcommittees, working groups, etc. And the question is always, we put these committees together, do they ever stop because their business is concluded? Well, we're going to put something is that once the document that the working group is preparing, and once that is approved, out the door and published, that working group will automatically be disbanded. And if there's an amendment or something to follow on, let's say the next edition, that body could be reconstituted. I'm just going to pick and choose something I might want to talk about. Clause 11, by the way, is on interpretations, and you can imagine that has a lot of angst, maybe is the best word to use. I don't want to go into detail. That'll take 15 minutes to try and explain it in and of itself. Remote participation. The question is, if you want to run the meeting as a webinar, can you do that? And right now it's not there in the operating procedures. There is a requirement that the C63 main committee is only a face-to-face meeting, but the subcommittees can, if they wish, open up to a webinar for those that might want to give reports on progress of the standard. But it was felt, and will continue to be felt, that you have to be there, you have to be in it to win it, and therefore all the voting members should be present at the main committee. And there's things that we obviously didn't want to do right now at first. So he just mentioned you have good comments. Next few months. Right now we're on target for something coming up in the next C63 series of meetings, which will be the week of November 9th at Research Triangle Park, Underwriters Laboratories. And so that's where we'll find out more about what he did here. Okay, let's close that down and continue on. And what Jerry Ramey, the secretary, captures is a little bit of the discussion here, but this discussion could have gone on for 15 minutes, and he captured this in 150 words, 200 words. There was I mentioned the concern about patents, and one of the things, let me just bring it up. By the way, this is not just C63 issues. This is international as well as C63. And there was a document presented, and let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. This came from one of the members of a working group. You can see it's two months ago. Please accept this letter regarding proposed test procedures. We understand there are potential for our patent intellectual property to be deemed essential, and its use may be required in the proposed American standard. As we have indicated in earlier responses, as discussed with the group, we currently understand we do not believe require the use of the patent Wilson Electronics intellectual property, and so forth. So I don't propose to read the whole document, but you can see that there is interest to making sure that the patent holder has authorized the use of the patented material, and in fact this is triggered that at the start of each working group and subcommittee meeting, the chair has to call out, are there any patent issues that apply to standards that will be talked about, and it's formally asked, and everyone in the meeting is requested to say yes or no. Generally there's few that say yes, and here's one instance where it happened, but that did trigger a change in our procedure. Okay, let me close that down. Now we're going to get into Subcommittee 1, which has most of the work that I probably will spend time on here. Okay, let's bring it up there. Zong Chen from ETS Language is the chair. And at each first meeting of the year, the scope and the membership list has to be approved. And the scope was not changed. And this, you'll find this on the subcommittee website. So I'm not going to spend time on it. There are some working groups now that he wants to update. C63.2 is instrumentation, test measurement instrumentation. And I've already kind of went over that with Pat Roeder's presentation. That ballot closed, and now they're working on what to do with taking into account the comments. There were 3 negative votes. You can see the reason for it. One is kind of a very interesting one, the first one there. The frequency band ended at 10 hertz instead of 9 kilohertz. And the question was raised, well, wait a minute. C63 standards start at 9 kilohertz and work their way up to 40 gigahertz and above. So they're going to sort through what to do, and maybe just a special clause that will say for a particular application, you use the document can be used down to, let's say, 10 hertz. There was a lot of editorials you can see in the second bullet item, adding a lot more normative references. But in fact, it boiled down to C63.2 is essentially replicating, or says that the requirement is CISPR 1611 up to 18 gigahertz, and between 18 gigahertz and 40 gigahertz, which is the extent of the emission measurements in C63.4, you have to use what's in C63.2. So it's bifurcated depending on the frequency range. Of course, the working group held a meeting, and they're asked for the mill standard members to look at their frequency range and come up with what they think they need in theirs. And you can see the last indented bullet item there. If no input is received by the date above, which is June 8th, which is a month after the meeting, it will be 9 kilohertz to 40 megahertz. Actually, it's 40 gigahertz. That's an error. 40 gigahertz. You might make a note of that. As far as I know, there were no comments, so the range of our standards is 9 kilohertz to 40 gigs. There was an approval for some work. I don't want to go into. By the way, a PIN-C is a committee project identification notification system, which doesn't go to ANSI for review. It's just to sort of set what study questions we will look at before we decide there would be a standard needed at all. So if in this case it's C63.4, and I'm the chair of that working group, and I did get the PIN-C approved, and there were 21 proposals for changes, even the 2014 edition, and that was narrowed down by the committee to 9 that they thought were of highest priority. And so our working group meeting, the first of that week, we did review the 9. I assigned, the working group has about 15 people, as you might imagine. It's a very high. It is the premier standard for unintentional radiator measurements, emission both conducted and radiated. So I broke it up and assigned lead persons on each of the 9 topics. I'm going to be working on a webinar at the end of this month to see where we stand. And of course, I just confirmed that we will have a C63 7.4 working group meeting on Monday, 9 November between 10 a.m. and noontime, again, Eastern time. We'll be in Eastern Standard Time by that time, by the way. The one on antenna calibration, you know, this is dragged on for almost too long. And so the ballot that came back for the failed ballot is there's a resolution scheduled for, you know, after this particular meeting, and you kind of look at the gist of it. There were 4 negative responses, which were fairly significant, and I won't go into detail right now, but there were 293 comments. You can see the vast majority were editorial. But with 41 technical comments and 4 negatives, this will obviously have to be recirculated with, you know, how you would resolve that. And so we expect this working group to have a draft of the next draft, you know, in time to ballot by the November meeting. And they already have set aside a meeting time to go over what they might present to the parent committee, the main committee, which is always the last day of the 4-day C63 meeting sequence. So if you're interested in the overarching activity and the review and the decision making, clearly if you go on the C63 website, look for the main committee meeting, which is the last day of the week, which is a Thursday, because they meet Monday through Thursday. And if you had to come to one meeting, that would be the meeting. Now, if you're interested in technical details of and want to contribute to a standards activity, then of course you will have to be at the meetings earlier in the week. And some of those meetings have webinars so that people can listen in and try and present at a distance. And that's all announced as the meeting time approaches. So Annex N, by the way, is the validation of the use of hybrid antennas in a particular chamber. It turns out that hybrids, of course, can be used now in the 2014 edition of C63.4, but there is a requirement that has to be met in the chamber that it's being used. It has to do with the size has to be less than 1.5 meters in any dimension. Has to do with essentially the balance test. You turn the antenna 180 degrees, and you have to be within less than a dB. And if those things are met at first, and the balance test has to be done over the full frequency range of calibration, then it can be used anywhere. If it passes in a particular chamber but not in other chambers, then of course it's limited to that one chamber. And if it doesn't work in any chamber that the testing organization uses or the company testing organization uses, then you got to buy another antenna. Fortunately, the last I heard, most of the hybrids that are presently there, most by a large majority, only about 10% kind of fail the requirement. And that's all contained in this PowerPoint slide I'm showing. There's something we added on antenna calibration site itself, and you can see it has to be an open area test site and no weather protection, even though below 1 gigahertz it might meet NSA, but we're talking about these hybrids that can go above 1 gigahertz, so there are different requirements at that magic frequency at 1 gigahertz. On either side of it. Dot 7 is the one on, let's see if I can get this out of the way. I did. Get that out of the way. Yeah, I'm stuck. So let's leave it alone. This was published earlier this year, and what the main difference is between the earlier version, which was almost 10 years ago, it only went up to 1 gigahertz. Therefore, in the construction, the checking for suitability or validation only went up to a gigahertz. I was the primary author on this, and I moved it now up to 40 gigahertz, which will cover then fully absorbent line rooms, where you're looking really at making measurements above a gigahertz in free space. So it was a major addition to our standards, because now it gives hints on how you should construct and what to worry about, watch out for. Over the full frequency range, 30 megahertz to 18 gigahertz, well, actually 40 gigahertz. What we say in other documents that if the site is valid up to 18 gigahertz, it can be used up to 40. That's sort of a placeholder at the moment. And as you might imagine, above a gigahertz, we're into using the CISPR Bully standing wave ratio site validation method. And that's contained, I already mentioned, in C63.2. .25 is test site validation. Let me see if, okay. The big thing that's added to this particular draft document, and by the way, there will be a workshop in Dresden, Germany, excuse me, on the 14th of August, in which Zongchen and I are working on that workshop, as well as introduction to 2014 version of .4. The idea is that all of the test site validation that's, for example, in C63.4 is to be moved over to this document so that anything to do with site validation or acceptance is in one standard in C63. But the real addition is using time domain techniques for not only making, seeing if a site is usable, but if it's not, with the way in which the gating functions are used in using a network analyzer and so forth, you can pinpoint where there is a problem in a chamber, and where, for example, there may be insufficient absorber material there, or in fact there may be an absorber that has, is aged to the point where its specification is not met. This is the first time we've actually put this into a draft, and my view is once this is settled and we actually publish .25, it will move on to CISPR. Let's see, which one is this? Oh, this is the wireless working group. This is C63.10 and .26, and WWG stands for Wireless Working Group. C63.10 was published in 2013, and the word pending can be removed now because it is accepted by the FCC in a transition between June of this year and at the end of June of next year. It will be the only edition that will be used of .10, as only the 2014 edition will be only one accepted by the FCC at the end of the transition period. And this all came out of a report and order almost a year ago. And now it's been published in the Federal Register. The clock has started, and the end date for only using one edition will be in June of next year. So this is Art Wall group, and he just gives some information that the chair picked up. And I don't propose to go into what is happening, but you can see by the way, .10 is for unlicensed and .26 is for licensed. So the majority of action is on .26, and you can see the subjects there: channel aggregation, use of loop antennas, numbers for low frequency measurements, measuring power. What do you because it scans 1 to 4 meters. They wanted to see the antenna pattern in the downward direction towards space measurement, and therefore they raised the table top suggestion up to 1.5 meters, and then the antenna going down to 1 meter, let's say in horizontal polarization, can see some of the energy that's emitted, below the horizon, so to speak. Then there was some motion for some new information, new activity. You can see one on industrial, scientific, and medical. They're worried about wireless power transfer and what would replace measurement procedure 5 the FCC has, and they requested assistance to do that. And you can see when this was asked for, 34 people said, "I want to be on that working group." It's a very high amount of people. So it was approved. We continue on. And the FCC's requested cease to assist. By the way, this was coming from the FCC. Wireless power transfer, WPT, is a hot topic internationally as well. We're dealing with it in CISPR as we speak here. Then this is another task to replace measurement procedure 5, which is the ISM measurement procedure the FCC has had for probably 40 or 50 years, with the standard that might come out of this activity of this new working group. And these all were approved. Then we have the last thing perhaps mentioned here is we have a lot of interpretations of, and most of them are on C63.4, the 2014 edition. I don't really propose to go into them, but there are concerns. Well, there's questions, for example, on if you have a large antenna and a small imaginary cylinder that encompasses the equipment under test, how can you do the site validation, which says that you do it at 4 extremes of the cylinder, where if the cylinder is very small, where is the 4 extremes? And if you try to aim an antenna, it's going to cover the entire cylinder radius, if you will, or diameter. And those questions then are being worked out, one by one. And you can see, since I was one of the principal writers of .4, I get involved in a lot of these. And we even have stuff in 2009. So I think that's all I want to say about Subcommittee 1. Let's move on to others. So we have 15 minutes to go. So let me close this guy. And I'm going to move now down to Subcommittee 2 report. This is the definition. In fact, well, let me bring it up real quick because I want to capture some of the other subcommittee activity. And this is, let's see, make it full here. And there's a scope, and here's the membership, which is, as you can see, most of the chairs of the working group subcommittees are on it, because when those are put out, those standards are put out, there are definitions included that should go into the into this dictionary. And there's the number of people. And their working group 2 has just been formed. This is the subcommittee wants to have a standard on best practices for EMC compliance. And this is something those that are on the webinar or view it later on might want to participate in, because they're looking right now for more generic EMC standards that may come from any source, Society of Automotive Engineers, IEEE, and so forth. So they're at this point gathering conclusion is the document has been recently published, 2014 edition, and this draft standard with first WebEx scheduled for June actually hasn't occurred yet. I'm on this committee, and I just got a notice that can I add some more non-C63 and non-IEEE standards to this call out, and I'm working on that right now, and I expect this WebEx will not be until September. And we won't go into the backup slides. So let's escape and move on here. Okay. SC3 is on the linkage between our work and the work of the CISPR in particular. And let me just sort of give you a sense of what that's about. And make that full screen. Paul Anderson, retired from Chrysler, is the chair. I'll go past these because these always have to be approved at the first meeting of the year. The membership, there's no names next to it, but one of the things you'll see is a strong automotive interest, as well as general interest, and of course the work going on in CISPR. For example, Andy Griffin is a chair of a subcommittee in CISPR, and of course, I'm the chair of, and Dan Houlihan is works with subcommittee B, and so forth. What they do, the idea is to come up with analyzing if there's anything that we are doing in C63 that might be useful to submit to the U.S. National Committee Technical Advisory Group to present to CISPR, and in the reverse direction, if there's something going on in CISPR, can it augment or be at least referenced in the work we do in our own standards. And that is always asked at the start of the meeting, and we go through one at a time all of our standards and see if there's a linkage to an international standard, largely CISPR at this point, but not exclusively. There is a recommended practice for emission setting and immunity test levels. It's a recommended practice, which means it's not a standard. There's no shall statements in there. But if, for example, you're working on something that you want to have, let's say, more of an immunity requirement, there's guidance in this document which is above what might be required as basic, let's say, for the European community, where they call that the Euro norms on the various immunity test methods. So this, we feel, is going to be a very good addition to manufacturers, and of course the testing organizations will point this out to help them, their clients, which are manufacturers. So the website is as it might be. I don't think there's anything more to say there. I think this is a very interesting committee, by the way, because it's one of the ones that are watching what's happening around the world, outside of the C63 area, so that we don't keep looking at ourselves alone. Okay, let's move on to Subcommittee 5, which is immunity testing. Subcommittee 1 is largely emission. This is immunity. Show you what's going on in the immunity area. Steve Weitzel is the chair. Here we'll go past the membership. Here's the scope. It's responsible for developing and maintaining new and existing immunity testing techniques and instrumentation as requested. And we have 4 documents that is active. Well, maybe I'll cut that back. C63.9 has been published. This is testing the immunity of audio office equipment, such as a Polycom speakerphone, in the presence of cell phones and other two-way radios that might disturb the audio teleconference. And the interesting thing here is that because of the surveying of what is in some of these offices that are used by individuals that walk in, the radiated immunity test level, believe it or not, is 30 volts per meter, 30 volts per meter, not the typical 3 and 10. Dot 15 is another recommended practice. This is one I'm working on. The big thing about this one is it gives insight of how much power and what kind of antennas and what kind of field for the radiated immunity test. And for example, say for a particular antenna with particular gain, to get a particular test level, you would need an amplifier that that doesn't go into saturation. Let's say you need a 10-watt amplifier. Well, that's good news, and if you want to put a safety factor, you might get a 20-watt. But the bottom line is it goes that much back in the measurement chain or the signal generation chain. Dot 16 is electrostatic discharge. It starts off with that you already are doing the IEC 61000-4-2 test, but how did that play out when a customer gets it in the field and has unique things that, let's say a PC. For example, if the PC connects to a docking station, those two have different potentials, and they have to be tested with in a particular way with the ESD gun. That's not called out whatsoever in 4-2, and so the contribution of this document is to help manufacturers find complaints in the field with what's been found in practice needs to be checked. So I think that's going to be a contribution that will be very helpful. And here he just mentions who's on there. And this is for the update to the audio teleconference standard C63.9. I've already talked about the ESD, and we do have one on generic immunity testing. Now, C63.18 is for medical location, hospitals, for example, which has special monitoring equipment like oxygen monitoring and things of that nature. Then the question was, well, can we extend it to existing transceivers used in other places? And Doc 24 is meant to at least start to address that. So let me close this down, and we have one or two things I want to check. Laboratory accreditation, I don't think I have to go into. This is mainly for us to hear what A2LA and AVLab and LAB are doing and what help we can do in making their application to ANSI better. Subcommittee 7 has to do with, as you can see, UPCS, and right now they're worried. The biggest thing they're worried about is coexistence, where there are multiple. It's maybe worthwhile bringing that up. Okay. Here. Steve Berger is in charge of that, and let me just go to the comments here. So the real thing that pushed this standard to C63.27 was the typical case in a hospital where you have 15 or 20 non-patient connected or patient connected but not implanted, devices that use Wi-Fi to send signals back to the monitoring station. And what you're running into then is congestion of the spectrum use at 2.45 gigahertz. So how do you handle how you would monitor that and so forth? And so they're investigating now having, first of all, collecting data of what are shared, and the medical device folks, particularly the FDA in particular, is interested on this coexistence. And is it a spectrum occupancy issue or is it an EMC issue? And right now it's leaning towards being an EMC issue. Can there be, let's say, special data that can be sent in a particular manner? So we'll see how that plays out. So right now they're collecting information on what's out there. We have a strong NIST NTIA presence on the committee, and they're revising, and there's the title. It will be a standard on evaluation of wireless coexistence. And we look forward to how this ends up at the November meeting. So let me close that, and there's only one or two other things I might want to talk about. We have medical device testing in subcommittee. It's the last subcommittee I'll talk about, and we'll kind of close up. Bring this up. Bob DeLisi of Underwriters Laboratory is the chair, and again, this is all these things are connected once the minutes are approved, and they're hyperlinked, so I don't want to go into particular detail. I already talked about .18 on in situ measurement of immunity of medical devices, and .19 is compatibility issues with hearing aids. Hearing aids, believe it or not, we thought we had that solved with cell phones next to the hearing aid. Well, we're finding that some of them are, there's still a significant number, those that use the T-coil, so to speak, of not hearing good, having interference and not being able to hear very well next to the use of the cell phone in particular. So hearing incompatibility, you can see in the second bullet item they want to address voice over Wi-Fi, voice over the new types of signal transmission, simultaneous transmission. Some of the well, most of the smartphones have multiple links from Bluetooth on, and the question is, how do you handle getting the immunity of the hearing aid to accommodate this onslaught of features? And I won't go into it, but you can see that we thought it was current, but it's right at the top here. Currently, 25% of those polled are claiming issues when using wireless phones, and we thought we had this solved a couple years ago. 25% is a big number, by the way. It's not just one or two people having a problem. So let me close this and go to a conclusion here. This is the lion's share of the meeting. There's always new business. The interpretation response time, which I talked about, may take a long time. We talk about the website. I give a report on the next education activity. There's a newsletter that comes out. Let me just close with bringing up the education report, because I really work hard to get our standards out there to people to use and learn more about. So Santa Clara, we held a two-day workshop on .4 and .10 and .26. I focused on the half day on the changes from the 2009 edition. In Dresden, it shows here that we expanded to one day. Well, in fact, we could not meet on Saturday because no one goes to any kind of business meeting on Saturday in Europe. So we cut back, and I'm going to give a half a day on .4, and Zong Chen is going to give a half a day on C63.25. And we were setting up an experiment on using the actual conforming a time domain measurement. We're going to do it at the Technical University in Dresden. So that's a slight change in what the slide shows. And I always keep in mind when any of these slides show, any of these standards shown here are published or updated, they are fodder for having a workshop. And the idea is that we try at least to do it at the EMC symposia, but we're open to suitcase it, to bring it into a company, a test lab, or a major area where there's committee action going on. We pay through registration, we pay for all expenses for the instructors and the hotel, the food functions, etc. So really are looking for people that have an idea where we might put on the next one and which one it could be. So with that, let's close this. You've come to the end of the agenda. You've come to the end of things I wanted to talk about. And at the end of the agenda is, of course, all the action items that came out of the meeting. And you can see we're up to action item 94. And then we start over the numbering system. And then there's the list of all the attachments that I've brought many of them up. So with that in mind, I probably will work on the webinar to follow up at the November C63 meeting. I think I've gone over as much as I can in the hour we have. I appreciate the attendance on live and, of course, those that might view it later on. So with that, I bring to a close the webinar on the activity of American National Standard Accredited Committee C63. So I close the webinar.